Hi, welcome to Doses of Deception. I'm your host, Phoebe McGuire. As a seasoned nurse with more than 3 decades of experience, we will discuss various topics, exposing deception, and empowering you with knowledge and information to foster critical thinking. This show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide medical advice. So please consult your trusted healthcare provider. So, welcome everyone to episode 7. We are plugging right along. Your support means the world to me. If you would, please follow my channel on Rumble. That's rumble.com/doses of deception. Or over on X, you can find me at BB_McGuire. If you'd like to contact me with any questions, suggestions, or you're interested in sponsoring the show, please email me at dosesofdeception@proton.me. Also, if you would, please smash that thumbs up button on Rumble or that little heart on X. It does help so much. And most importantly, please share this video with others so they can be empowered too. So tonight, I am super stoked to announce that I am partnering with Tulip Blooms. Tulip Blooms offers an exquisite collection of handcrafted soaps, lotions, and premium skin treatments. I personally love the goat's milk and honey soap. All 100% organic ingredients without parabens, sulfates, those nasty synthetic colors, or any formaldehyde. This Mother's Day, give the gift of pure, radiant wellness with Rainfall Lotion to heal, soothe, and moisturize skin at the deepest level, just as nature intended. Use promo code DOSES for 10% off your entire order. Visit tulipblooms.shop, promo code DOSES. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this show and me. So I thank you so very, very much for your support. And I'm excited. I have my first sponsor. This is exciting. Thank you, Patrick. So this week, there's quite a few posts that kind of caught my attention. And I bring them to your attention because these are great folks to follow. First, we have Dr. Simon Goddick over on X. He posted, if you can't replicate it, it's not science. If you can't question it, it's not science. And if you can't criticize it, it's a cult. Yeah. And this one grabbed my attention. If you stay silent in this war between good and evil, your life might be easier, but your children's won't. And I know that I will not stay silent. I am in this for my children and my grandchildren and your grandchildren. And we can't be silent anymore. We just can't. And the more we expose and the more we share, the less these doses of deception work. So, Dr. Berg posted this. Medicine does not create health. It manages symptoms. Could this be because chronic diseases are profitable and treating symptoms long-term yields more revenue than curing the disease? Yeah, folks, this is healthcare today. One of my other favorites over on X, Just Human. I love that title. He posted, authenticity always wins. In the short term and the long term, in the micro and the macro, at scale or in the moment, today, tomorrow, and every day, being authentic in all things is the best, most ethical, and most principled approach. Be authentically you. And my friend Blue Eyes, Abby, posted this. People don't realize how hard it is to speak the truth to a world full of people that don't realize they're living a lie. Oh boy, Blue Eyes, ain't that the truth? Good grief. And Dan the Man, Dan Scavino, over on X, posted this. The only people I owe my loyalty to are those who never made me question theirs. You got that right, Dan. Bring the heat. So this week, RFK appeared on Dr. Phil's show and highlighted just how poorly the U.S. handled COVID. Let's take a look.
We have the highest healthcare cost and the poorest healthcare delivery of the other 37 developed nations that it's compared to. You intend to change that.
We spend 2 to 3 times what any other country in the world spends on healthcare, and we have the worst outcomes. We're literally the sickest people in the world. We have the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. During COVID, we had the highest death rate from COVID of any country in the world. So we had 16% of the COVID deaths in the United States, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And so it's a mystery why people are getting awards and kudos and applause for managing COVID in this country, because we literally did worse than any country in the world. Now, if you ask CDC, why did we do so poorly? They say, well, it's not our fault. It's because Americans are so sick, which, by the way, is their fault. But the CDC said the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. And so they had obesity or diabetes or asthma, and then one other thing, or some other combination of chronic disease, and that's really what killed them. These were people who were so sick that they were basically hanging from a cliff, and COVID came along and stamped on their fingers and dropped them off. But they were already living lives that were burdened by sickness. And what we need to do as a country, we're really, if you look at the data today, the fertility of our kids is down. A teenager today has half the testosterone of a 64 or 68-year-old man. We have they have half the sperm counts of an older man. Our girls are hitting puberty 6 years early. Now, earlier than historic levels. They're hitting puberty between 10 and 13 years old. And these are all, and the infertility is now going up in women and men. We have 74% of our kids cannot qualify for military service, so this is a national security issue. And we're spending, I met with the health minister of Indonesia this week, and he said in his country they spend $3,300 a year per patient, and they have a lifespan, an average lifespan of 84 years old. We spend $12,000 a year per patient, per capita, and we have a lifespan of 79. We used to have the same lifespan as they did in Europe, but the Europeans have now moved 6 years ahead of us, and we've stayed stagnant.
So we're spending 4 times as much, and our life expectancy is going down. Something's wrong. I mean, clearly something's wrong.
Yeah, clearly something is wrong. HHS announced that they will require placebo testing of all new vaccines. The Washington Post responded with this headline: RFK Jr. will order placebo testing for new vaccines, alarming health experts. Well, first of all, how many of you did not know that your flu vaccine, your shingles vaccine, your pneumonia vaccine was never tested for safety or efficacy against a control group? I mean, didn't we all just assume that they had? And think about this headline. Why would placebo testing alarm health experts? So ICANN, which is the Informed Consent Action Network, identified that not one single routine childhood vaccine was licensed based on a long-term placebo-controlled trial. Not one. Were you informed? of this when you consented on behalf of your child? Because I know I was not. And these manufacturers have complete liability protection. They weren't tested for safety against a placebo-controlled group. And they have liability protection. And these vaccines are mandatory for our children to attend school. And in many districts, exemptions are not allowed. As you'll see when we get into our discussion tonight, you'll see these same people screaming about the necessity of this type of trial for ivermectin, but not for the injections into our children. Wow. So HHS highlighted the first 100 days of accomplishments. So we're going to take a look. All righty. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services celebrating 100 days of the Trump administration. So we're just going to scroll down here. The MAHA Commission was established, and coming up here on May the 24th, they're going to be submitting an initial Make Our Children Healthy Again assessment and strategy. And then on August 12th, the MAHA Commission will submit the Make Our Children Healthy Again strategy to the president. And then on April 22nd, FDA announced that petroleum-based dyes will be phased out of our food. On April the 16th, Secretary Kennedy held a press conference on the latest CDC data showing an alarming increase in autism, and it was deemed a public health emergency. The FDA's generally recognized as safe designation, the GRAS standards, will be overhauled. USDA Secretary Rollins and HHS Secretary Kennedy are collaborating to update the 2025-2030 dietary guidelines for Americans, and the updated new edition will be released before the December deadline. They will be MAHA focused with priorities to improve nutrition for all Americans and reduce the burden of chronic disease. Operation Stork Speed was launched to make infant formula healthy again. And then, oh boy, RFK dropped a complete bombshell in the cabinet meeting this week. If you missed it, here it is again.
We have ended HHS as the role as the vector, the principal vector in this country for child trafficking. And during the Biden administration, HHS became a collaborator in child trafficking and for sex and for slavery. And we have ended that, and we're very aggressively going out and trying to find these children, the 300,000 children that were lost by the Biden administration.
What? I mean, wait a minute. Let me get a little drink here. So, we're going to go through the transcript of that slowly because this is a bombshell, folks. We have ended HHS as the role, as the vector, the principal vector in this country for child trafficking. And during the Biden administration, HHS became a collaborator in child trafficking for sex and for slavery. And we have ended that. And we're aggressively going out and trying to find these children. The 300,000 children that were lost by the Biden administration. Lost? I think we are going to very soon find out exactly where these children went. And I know that this is a dark and deeply disturbing subject to even consider, but we must, because we cannot change what we are not willing to acknowledge. And whoa. So, who was the secretary of HHS under Biden? Well, that would be Xavier Becerra. And that is a name that you should keep on the forefront of your mind, Xavier Becerra, because I think he's going to have some very troubled times ahead. So, last week, we covered hydroxychloroquine in depth, and it was a doozy. So the big takeaway for us all was that zinc brought into the cell by a zinc ionophore, like hydroxychloroquine, stops all RNA viruses, that's the cold, the flu, COVID, and a host of others, from replicating, which halts the ability of the virus to progress to illness. Well, guess what else is a zinc ionophore? Ivermectin. So ivermectin also impairs the COVID spike protein, remember those, from attaching to the ACE2 receptors on our cell membranes, preventing viral entry into the cell. If the virus can't enter, it can't replicate. And if it can't replicate, we don't get sick. Again, massive research on this week's topic of ivermectin. I'd like to cite several resources. The Real Anthony Fauci by RFK Jr., The Courage to Face COVID-19 by Peter McCullough, COVID-19 and the Global Predators by Dr. Peter Breggin, The War on Ivermectin by Dr. Pierre Corey, and Pierre Corey's 3-part series, The Global War on Ivermectin, on his Substack page, Pierre Corey's Medical Musings. Highly recommend that as a follow. And a butt ton of studies. I'll show you. Like, there you go. A butt ton. It's a butt ton. Yeah, lots. So you can ask my husband. I'm down here in the pit. That's what I call this area, the pit. Down here with my highlighter and my studies, like a little mole in a hole in the pit. So lots of work. Let's get to work. So in March of 2020, Dr. Paul Merrick, another one of my favorite doctors, 4 times board certified and chief of intensive care medicine at Eastern Virginia Medical School, began posting treatment guidelines for COVID patients. He then recruited a team of the most highly respected and published ICU physicians from across the globe to research all possible approaches to COVID care. And the FLCCC Alliance was born. They created a website and began posting their protocols in mid-April of 2020. And I think it was about the summertime of 2020, maybe June-ish, that I discovered their website and began researching and learning. And it was quite eye-opening. I mean, first it was Dr. Zelenko and what I learned, and then on to FLCCC, and whoa. By November, they felt there was enough evidence to add ivermectin to their protocols. And the Journal of Intensive Care Medicine published their protocols in mid-December of 2020. So the FLCCC Alliance has recently been renamed the Independent Medical Alliance. They can be found at imahealth.org. Again, that's imahealth.org. And we're going to take a look. So if you look at their website, the Independent Medical Alliance, along the top here, you're going to see home, treatment, resources, education, community. If you go under treatment, you'll see strategies to prevent and treat COVID-19, long COVID, RSV, flu, and vaccine-related issues. And then over here, there's strategies to prevent and treat conditions like cancer, depression, insulin resistance, and more. So this is a tremendous amount of resources free for you to access. It's phenomenal. If we go under here under resources, there's patient resources and professional resources, but you can access either one. We're going to go over here under professional resources to ivermectin facts. And it kind of goes over the remarkable story of ivermectin, how it was derived. And they've done a phenomenal video that just kind of goes over the entire history really succinctly. Let's take a look and watch it together.
What is ivermectin? Here are a few key points before we take a closer look. It was first discovered in 1973 and has been approved for human use since 1987, with more than 4 billion doses distributed worldwide. The World Health Organization has also included it on its list of essential medicines. And it's been called a wonder drug due to its versatility, safety profile, and beneficial impact it has had worldwide, earning a Nobel Prize to the two men who discovered and developed it. It's fascinating to note that ivermectin shares a very interesting trait with penicillin and aspirin in the fact that they were all found and derived from nature. But to truly understand ivermectin and its impact, we'll take it back to the very beginning. The full story of ivermectin begins with Satoshi Omura in the early 70s. Working as a microbiologist at the distinguished Kitasato Institute, he was searching for new antibacterial compounds. Having grown up in a farming family, he developed a deep respect for nature and believed, as he still does today, that it held all the things we need to have healthy and productive lives. Because of this, the Kitasato Institute was the perfect home for his research, having been founded by Shibasaburo Kitasato, who also believed in the discovery of drugs and vaccines derived from natural sources. That belief drove Professor Omura's purpose to discover useful chemicals and bioactive agents in nature, and more specifically in soil-dwelling organisms. He's collected thousands of soil samples from all over Japan to find and isolate these new microorganisms. One sample proved to be very promising. From soil that was taken very close to the Kawana Golf Club just a few hours south of Tokyo, Professor Omura and his team were able to isolate a new organism. Through a process of culturing and fermenting the organism, they soon found that it produced a very active class of compounds called ivermectins. All the right pieces were in place, as it was also during this time that Professor Omura and the Kitasato Institute had a partnership with the Merck, Sharp, and Dome Company, and all the resources they had in taking the compounds to the next level. It was 1975, and William Campbell was the head of an interdisciplinary team at the labs when they received the samples from the Kitasato Institute. It was his task to screen the sample along with 53 others sent by Professor Omura's team. The ivermectin was highly effective against worms and other parasites. They then modified it to be safer and more effective. That result was ivermectin. They have since searched the world over for the microorganisms that produced those original ivermectins. Quite remarkably, that sample site south of Tokyo remains the only place they've ever been found. An astounding fact considering the global impact the drug has had. In the time after isolating and screening the new ivermectins, further analysis revealed the efficacy against a diverse range of parasitic worms and insects. In fact, they found it to be 25 times more potent than other antiparasitic drugs. It was also the first drug in a new class that could treat parasites both internally and externally. called insecticides. In 1981, ivermectin was released commercially to treat animals and quickly became the top-selling veterinary drug in the world, used in both domestic animals and livestock. It was so effective, it nearly eradicated a roundworm commonly found in horses. But the goal was always a drug that could treat both animals and humans, so the work didn't end there. William Campbell pushed forward on more studies to see if ivermectin could be used against onchocerciasis, also known as river blindness, after finding that a close relative to the worm that caused river blindness was very effectively killed in horses. River blindness is caused by Onchocerca volvulus, a parasitic worm that can live in the body for up to 14 years. It's spread through the bite of infected black flies that carry the tiny worms in larval form from person to person. Aside from blindness, they also cause severe skin issues and intense itching, as well as being generally debilitating. In fact, in the West African savanna, half the males over 40 years of age were blind due to onchocerciasis. In 1981, Merck began clinical trials in Senegal. Safety was a top priority, so they began with a very small dose of ivermectin. River blindness was a massive health emergency, as well as a socioeconomic issue, and they were set on addressing it effectively with ivermectin. They found that a single annual dose would reduce those immature worms to zero. Ivermectin could then be taken annually for the life of the adult worm and prevent all the devastating effects of infection, including the blindness that was disabling so many. In 1987, Merck registered ivermectin for human use under the brand name of Mectizan. What followed was a great nod to George Merck's philosophy on medicine.
Merck & Company is an industrial firm, but in the conduct of our business, we have endeavored to live up to certain principles. We try to remember that medicine is for the patient. We try never to forget that medicine is for the people. It is not only for the profit.
They established the Mectizan donation program and began distributing ivermectin at no cost for the treatment of onchocerciasis, committed to continue their distribution for as long as needed and wherever needed. Ivermectin has proven equally effective in another devastating parasitic disease known as elephantiasis. To date, over 30 years later, more than 4 billion treatments have been donated in 49 countries for combined treatment against river blindness and elephantiasis. A component to the large ongoing distribution is the safety profile of ivermectin. In fact, the WHO concluded that ivermectin was so safe that with some training, non-medical people could oversee their community's ongoing administering of the drug. In 2015, Professor Satoshi Omura and William Campbell received a proper acknowledgement for their discovery of ivermectins and the impact ivermectin has had all over the world. They were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine.
In the spaces of physiology or medicine, the ultimate goal is to achieve scientific breakthroughs that change our view of human health, disease, and normal vital processes.
From more than 40,000 different Streptomyces cultures, he was able to identify a completely unknown type, Streptomyces ivermectin, that contained a compound never seen before and which would change the history of medicine. William C. Campbell received the Streptomyces strain from Omura and identified the unique properties of Streptomyces ivermectin in killing many different intestinal nematodes with extraordinary potency. Given the efficacy of ivermectin, global initiatives sponsored by WHO and NGOs have the goal now to eliminating these two diseases by 2025.
The story of ivermectin has been an incredibly positive and impactful one, with worldwide recognition of its benefits to humanity over the decades of safe and widespread use. In 2019, the world changed. And today, in 2021, we're still living and dealing with the virus that locked the world down. In reality, COVID-19 may be the only reason many even know of ivermectin. The name has been mentioned and written thousands of times during the pandemic. Now you've seen the origins, use, safety, and benefit to millions around the world. The fact is, new potential uses for ivermectin had been studied before COVID-19 stopped the world in its tracks. Aside from its antiparasitic effects, studies have shown antiviral and anti-inflammatory mechanisms of action. And as drugs are commonly repurposed after research proves efficacy and safety, this was promising for many areas of use for ivermectin. Studies have shown effectiveness against influenza, Zika virus, dengue fever, malaria, tuberculosis, leukemia, HIV, and more. It's a drug whose full scope of use is only now becoming to be understood. COVID was a global health emergency, and this prompted many doctors and researchers to investigate existing and established drugs to repurpose, placing even more attention and broad worldwide research into ivermectin's potential uses. And due to its mechanism of action as an antiviral, it could be useful across future viruses and mutations. The story of ivermectin is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning, as acceptance of this drug and all its uses begin to be understood. That singular sample of soil and the microorganism discovered within has proven to be endlessly giving.
All righty. So, you know, when you look at the totality of this, I am so honestly so excited about ivermectin, and because I think about what it must have been like when penicillin was discovered, and what a difference penicillin made in the world. And you know, when I imagine that people probably thought that, what are you talking about? Something that you found in mold? Well, it would actually do this. And I kind of see that same thing happening with ivermectin. And I'm super excited because I feel like we're living it. We are going to live in the time where we discover ivermectin and its multiple uses. Yeah, we can just keep, you know, Big Pharma and their big paws out of the way. So on April 3rd, 2020, while media was fixated on President Trump's endorsement of hydroxychloroquine and Governor Cuomo's performances, a research team at Monash University of Australia published a study on ivermectin. They concluded that ivermectin is an inhibitor of SARS-CoV-2 virus in vitro. That means in the lab in a culture dish. A single treatment affected a 5,000-fold reduction in the virus at 48 hours in cell culture. Ivermectin being FDA approved for parasitic infections and included in the World Health Organization's model list of essential medicines, thus made it widely available. So let's take a look at a video about that. This is one of the few mainstream media that covered it.
Doctors could soon have a new tool in their arsenal for the fight against coronavirus. One America's Pearson Sharp has more on the medicine that researchers in Australia say could cure the virus in just 48 hours.
The fight against coronavirus could have a powerful new weapon. It's called ivermectin. News out of Australia has revealed doctors are now successfully using the drug to treat patients infected with the coronavirus, with one doctor saying it makes corona very simple to kill. So far, the medicine hasn't been widely used against the coronavirus specifically, but is typically used for parasitic infections. However, a peer-reviewed study led by Monash University back in April found that even a single dose of the drug could kill the coronavirus in less than 48 hours. Ivermectin is well established and has been available since the 1970s. It's FDA approved and is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. That means it has very few side effects and is considered one of the safest drugs in the world. In fact, in 2011, a scientific journal in Japan, where the medicine is originally from, called ivermectin a wonder drug, on the same level as penicillin and aspirin. And it's not only potent, it's also very inexpensive. The wholesale cost for a course of treatment is just 12 cents, meaning it's a safe and widely available treatment for the coronavirus. Australian doctor and Professor Thomas Borody is spearheading efforts to raise awareness for the drug's effectiveness.
It's an antiparasitic. It sits across South America, quite a bit in the USA, also India and Bangladesh. And in those places where trials between 80 and 160 patients were done, the amazing and surprising thing is there's not one paper where it was successful less than 100%. That is the actual factual result. It is curative within 6 to 8 days.
He says when used in combination with two other drugs, an antiviral called doxycycline and zinc, that ivermectin is amazingly effective in treating the coronavirus. The medicine works by allowing healthy cells to quickly remove the virus, preventing it from taking hold. Dr. Borody adds that countless doctors and frontline workers around the world, including himself, are already taking this treatment as a preventative against the coronavirus.
If we use a preventative combination of ivermectin every, say, 2 weeks, it would work like a vaccine, but it would not only cure, vaccine doesn't cure, and prevent recurrence as long as you took it for 1 year, 2 years.
Even doctors in the U.S. are having success with the drug. Doctors in Broward County, Florida, say they're already curing coronavirus patients with ivermectin and seeing a near 100% success rate.
If we get to those people early, and what I mean by that, if their oxygen requirements are less than 50%, I've had nearly a 100% response rate. They all improve.
Patients using the medicine are claiming it saved their lives.
And I'm blessed with that medicine because I didn't know what was going to happen. It saved my life. Trust me, it saved my life.
It's not clear how other medical experts in the U.S. will respond to this latest discovery. But with options like hydroxychloroquine and now ivermectin on the table, many say Democrats' refusal to make these medicines available is no different than murdering the patients who need them but can't get them. Pearson Sharp, One America News.
Wow. So following that April 3rd Monash publication, research teams and independent doctors all over the world studied ivermectin for COVID-19, and several favorable reports were published. But just like the favorable reports on hydroxychloroquine in February and March, there was silence from U.S. public health and university research institutions. And it received, again, minimal mainstream media coverage other than One America News. The doctors featured in that story, doctors JJ and Juliana Rajter, they owned an independent practice in Florida, and they did their own study. They studied 280 patients hospitalized in 4 Broward Health hospitals with confirmed COVID. 173 were treated with ivermectin and 107 with just the standard protocols. The study showed lower mortality in the ivermectin group. Mortality was also lower among 75 patients that were considered severe in their pulmonary disease. The ivermectin group, 38.8% versus 80.7% mortality in the other group with the standard protocols. So they began documenting on Facebook, and on April 12th, 2020, Juliana posted, "I have used ivermectin now on multiple patients with 100% response rate in 48 hours. Avoided intubation, no side effects noted." So their study was published in preprint on June 6th, 2020. Preprint means before peer review. It allows researchers to quickly disseminate their findings, but it's not yet vetted for its accuracy. So the preprint received zero public health or media attention. It was then peer-reviewed and published in the prestigious Chest Journal of Pulmonary Medicine, and still no attention. In the months that followed, favorable reports were published all over the world, notably India, Peru, and Mexico. Then, in August of 2020, the National Institutes of Health NIH issued a recommendation against using ivermectin except in clinical trials. Sounds exactly like what they did to hydroxychloroquine, doesn't it? So from Dr. Corey's book, The War on Ivermectin, he described his experience. As doctors gained more experience managing COVID patients, the practice of early intubation, that's the tube and you go on the ventilator, it began to phase out. They recognized that patients would come in with low oxygen levels, yet would appear comfortable in terms of their work of breathing, meaning, are they struggling? So they started using heated, high-flow nasal cannulas. And that way, 100% oxygen. Remember in the last episode, I was talking to you about the mask? Well, using the high-flow heated nasal cannula, they could deliver 100% oxygen right into the patient's nose comfortably. He said they began using this aggressively in lieu of ventilators. But unfortunately, many institutions and many doctors were just stuck operating on protocols. Oxygen saturation numbers, just a number on that thing on your finger, is what drove practice rather than critical thinking. To quote Dr. Corey, man, this is heavy. If the average person knew how bad the average doctor is, they'd probably never go to a hospital again. They like rules and protocols and guidelines and can cite them on command. Man. So Dr. Corey was also intrigued by what they were describing as happy hypoxia, which is low levels of oxygen at the tissue level, yet often without the accompanying discomfort or breathlessness or anxiousness. He thought it looked like what he called organizing pneumonia, which is not an infectious disease, but is actually a reaction to lung injury. And I find that very curious. The treatment that they found worked was corticosteroids and oxygen. So on an FLCCC Zoom call in mid-October of 2020, now this is after the NIH is saying we don't recommend ivermectin except for, clinical trials, Dr. Paul Merrick spoke about ivermectin and cited the peer-reviewed trial in Florida by Drs. JJ and Juliana Rajter. So they started researching, and they were shocked to find over a dozen in vitro, again, that means in the lab, in cell cultures, in vitro studies that had been published showing ivermectin stopped the replication of more than 10 different viruses, not just COVID, Zika, West Nile, HIV, and flu. All of them were RNA viruses, just like COVID. And remember, we learned all about those RNA viruses from Dr. Zelenko in our last episode when we talked about hydroxychloroquine. So Mickey Willis did a great job documenting Dr. Zelenko's contributions. He also covered the war on ivermectin. So we're going to take a look.
Of all the harmful misinformation spread over the past couple of years, one of the most disturbing false narratives was targeted at the Nobel Prize-winning human medicine, ivermectin. What you're about to see will reveal the motive behind the smear campaign against one of the safest and most effective medicines of this era, a medicine that, according to the numerous top scientists I've interviewed this year, could have ended the pandemic before it began.
So things are clearly bad, but they're being made even worse by people who have refused to take the vaccine and instead are swallowing horse paste.
Horse dewormer. There's no clinical evidence that indicates that this works.
It goes beyond that. We actually know that it doesn't work.
Ivermectin is ineffective against COVID,
but could put you in a coma.
It can kill you.
It can kill you.
Turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin.
One of those drugs he mentioned, ivermectin, is something more often used to deworm horses.
We should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs from veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie.
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You're the medical guy over there.
Ivermectin can be a very effective medication.
You are more likely to die from taking Tylenol than ivermectin, yet the FDA calls this a dangerous horse deworming medicine.
What initially led this was an FDA Twitter account that used the term y'all to express denigration of ivermectin as a horse drug. I have horses. The truth is that the dose that's used for horses by body weight is the same dose that's recommended for humans, but it's formulated and manufactured to a quality standard that's very different.
Lots of medicines are used in both animals and humans. So it's not a sufficient argument for somebody to say, it's a horse dewormer.
Yesterday, the CDC put out a national advisory on this, warning the whole country against taking this drug, ivermectin, formulated for horses and cows and sheep.
With that memo fired to every doctor, then suddenly me and all my early treatment colleagues around the country, we were faced with problems like we'd never had before.
I work as an emergency room doctor. And not only an emergency room doctor, I teach advanced trauma life support, a course to other doctors that want to work in the emergency room on how to stabilize patients. We were being told there's nothing you can do. Just wait for Fauci and the FDA to acknowledge a vaccine that they were going to create, and there's no treatment, they said. Why would you want to decrease access to quality life-saving measures for people who are fighting a worldwide pandemic?
So it was the first time in history that we ever saw a doctor who could be prosecuted for using a generic, safe, and effective drug for the application that doctor thought was appropriate.
My group of five, the core five of us ICU doctors, collectively were some of the most highly published doctors in the history of critical care medicine. Paul Marek is the most published practicing intensivist in the world.
As we sit here today, I'm the most published person in my field in history. But when COVID-19 hit, my clinical and academic world was turned upside down.
Twitter, in its wisdom, has decided to suspend the account of Dr. Robert Malone. Now, Robert Malone happens to be the inventor of the mRNA technology of making vaccines. His Twitter account has been suspended because he was allegedly spreading misinformation on COVID-19 vaccines. Let that sink in.
We have made contributions to our field for decades. So when we find ourselves like dismissed, and they'll do that to anyone, you're suddenly fringe.
Touted as a miracle prevention and cure by far-right commentators and anti-vaxxers.
I'm not, although I've been characterized as a right-wing Proud Boy. This is a bipartisan issue, and the physicians represented here are truly a bipartisan group.
Our lives started going sideways professionally. Paul started getting numerous complaints against him that he's never had in his career.
For the first time in my entire career, I could not be a doctor. I had to stand by idly. I had to stand by idly watching these people die.
From the FDA, Emergency Use Authorization of Medical Products and Related Authorities. For the FDA to issue an emergency use authorization, there must be no adequate, approved, and available alternative to the candidate product for diagnosing, preventing, or treating the disease or condition. If ivermectin were an effective treatment, the vaccines never would have gotten emergency use authorization in the U.S.
If a viable therapeutic strategy existed for outpatients, then the logic supporting universal vaccination with largely experimental products is no longer supportable.
The war on ivermectin is waged by very powerful forces with a lot of money. I mean, public health was built on an obsessive global vaccination policy, which ivermectin would have threatened.
We've got Pfizer's third quarter earnings. Revenue, they're projecting to be $98 to $102 billion.
Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna. Do you know how much profit they made from these shots? $1,000 every second from Wuhan virus vaccines.
You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in geopolitical implications that would be significantly affected if the people had access to a safe and widely available medicine.
This is an incredibly cheap drug. It's off license, it's generic, it can be manufactured in huge amounts in India, remarkably low cost.
Merck's patent on ivermectin expired in 1996. In 2021, Merck released a statement claiming that ivermectin was not an effective treatment against COVID-19 and bizarrely claimed, quote, a concerning lack of safety data in the majority of studies. It was plenty safe for Merck to distribute widely when it was still under patent, but now they're claiming the safety record is insufficient.
Folks need to understand that just because there is an article out there that asserts that something is false, recognize that those are paid.
Every major media outlet in the United States shares at least one board member with at least one drug company. Let me put it in perspective for you. These board members wake up, they go to a meeting at Merck or Pfizer, and then they have their driver take them over to a meeting with NBC to decide what kind of programming that network is going to air. They can't be honest and objective about Big Pharma because Big Pharma pays their bills.
In fact, one analysis claimed that 9 out of the top 10 drug makers spent more on marketing than they did on research.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
The royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
If asked the question, did you know how much influence your former employer had on big media and so on? I had no idea. It is clear that the pharmaceutical industry has a great deal of sway on what goes on. If you can shape the message, then you can shape the world. And that's what they've done.
When was the last time you turned on the news and ever got an update about how the rest of the world is handling COVID?
A group of South African doctors has launched an urgent court application. They are seeking easier access to ivermectin.
Globally, at least 5 countries want to use ivermectin to treat COVID-19, including India and Argentina.
There are numerous concrete tests in medical journals around the world that ivermectin does work.
The earliest reports we had, one of them we had in Peru, where they got into a good mode of using multi-drug treatment with an ivermectin-based approach that they were crushing their curves.
And the president of the Tokyo Medical Association announced to all doctors during a summer surge that they should use ivermectin in the treatment. Within weeks, the hospitalization rates reported out of Japan were lower than at any other time in the pandemic.
The real proof positive came when COVID-19 really hit hard in Mexico City. They finally, after lots of struggle, came in with an ivermectin-based multi-drug approach and literally cleared out their hospitals. And then we had reports all the way through that various states in India.
In India, the government has been widely promoting the use of ivermectin. State leaders have just declared that Uttar Pradesh is now officially COVID-free. A region with nearly as many people as the entire United States is totally COVID-free.
The miracle success of Uttar Pradesh, not one mention of ivermectin being used.
In the countries that it has been used, in the countries where the studies are, the results are not good. They are overwhelming. They are well over 90% success rate.
In the United States, it's a horse dewormer, it's horse paste, and only the illiterate, ignorant, and or unvaccinated use it.
The key paradox is if you look at the mortality rate in the United States, one of the most highly funded medical care systems in the world. And what we find is the mortality in the United States is among the worst in the world.
If you look at these innumerable failed policies, there's only one way to understand them. They are literally written by pharmaceutical companies. They can design trials to fail, to disprove the use of cheap medicines, and they can make things appear that they don't work.
I sit as a non-voting member of the active committee for drugs with NIH. I've seen the dynamics of what are going on with all those trials, most of which have failed. Unfortunately, it's eminently possible to manipulate the outcomes of a clinical study. If you want a study to fail, that's dead easy.
Now their fourth quote-unquote negative study of ivermectin in a major medical journal, and each time is a media frenzy.
There was a systematic review looking at randomized controlled trials that have been done, and they found that there was no benefit for ivermectin in reducing mortality, death to COVID-19, no reduction in symptoms or duration of symptoms for COVID-19, so it does not work.
People need to understand that academics have been threatened with losing their position and threatened with getting no further research grants if they speak out against the narrative. Guess why that is? 2/3 of the world's non-commercial biological research is funded by just 3 bodies. The Wellcome Trust in the UK, the NIH, and specifically the NIAID under Tony Fauci, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
There's this pattern that is consistent with a concerted effort to mislead the public by withholding information using modern technology, media, censorship, really, let's call it what it is, thought control.
He could actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job.
Yeah. Whenever you have clear-cut evidence that a drug works, you have an ethical obligation to immediately let the people know so that they could have access.
What are you telling people is the optimal profile?
I want a pill, orally administered, single pill, given for 7 to 10 days, little drug-drug interaction and low toxicity. Give me that and I'll be really happy.
Ivermectin has been used safely for decades, has no known drug interactions, won a Nobel Prize for its success treating humans, and is on the WHO's list of the safest, most effective medicines in the entire world.
And it showed an 86% effectiveness to prevent people from contracting COVID.
Ivermectin has been used over 4 billion times, and it's used for a wide variety of treatments.
Ivermectin has been shown to possess different anti-inflammation, antiviral, and anti-tumor properties.
Clinical studies abroad suggest it works.
All the studies show that it does have a positive effect.
That is the thing about ivermectin. It's not good, it's great.
I have never seen an evidence base this large with 81 controlled trials, 10 years of in vitro studies in the lab against a dozen RNA viruses, all showing that ivermectin stops replication. It literally is, in my mind, the single greatest public health achievement in our history of infection control in the world.
Wow. There's so much in there. There's just so much in there. The trials, that's an issue. And then the scope of, when Dr. Corey is talking about this is a medical breakthrough like none other in infectious disease. So on June 22nd, actually, I did want to show you this. In response to the FDA and their horse post, Dr. Corey trolling like a boss, he posted this. Hey, FDA, you are not a nurse. You are not a doctor. Seriously, y'all, stop it. And he's posing with a horse. I absolutely love that. Love that. The trolling. So on June 22nd of 2022, Doctors Mary Talley Bowden and Dr. Paul Merrick and Robert Apter sued the FDA and HHS. They alleged that the FDA's media campaign, The Horse Thing, illegally interfered with their ability to practice medicine by discouraging the off-label use of ivermectin for COVID. The case was initially dismissed, but then the Fifth Circuit on appeal ruled that the FDA had overstepped their authority by giving medical advice. So I'll just show you. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. So the FDA settles ivermectin lawsuit, removes contentious COVID-19 posts. So the FDA permanently removed several of their social media posts, but the damage had already been done.
Department of Justice attorney says, we've always allowed, we never told doctors they couldn't prescribe ivermectin. Really, this is a Twitter account that went out to the world, the FDA's Twitter account. This is what they wrote. You're not a horse, you're not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it. And then you click on that link and it actually goes directly to a web page from the FDA that literally says why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. But let's just put all that aside for a second, because those type of communications work their way down to the individual hospitals and pharmacies and medical boards. So it wasn't the FDA anymore. It was the boss in the office next to you that was keeping an eye out at individual doctors. This is an internal email from one of our previous guests from a hospital system in New York. August 2021, when it was all kicking off, this is what it says. In order to provide optimal patient care, it is imperative that treatment decisions are based on evidence-based data, not anecdotal opinions. With respect to the use of ivermectin, it has been and will remain until further notice the policy and practice of Rochester Regional Health and its hospitals to not incorporate this medication into the medical algorithm for the treatment of COVID-19. So it's not even an option. It's literally disappeared in the computer system. You can't even write a prescription for it if you're a doctor. It goes on to say, if a family references ivermectin, it is advised that all staff provide consistent message that the medication is not supported by evidence-based data nor approved by the medical agencies that approve medications and opine on the medication's safety and effectiveness. So you're a patient in that hospital, your doctor won't prescribe it. So you go to other doctors in that hospital, you go to other nurses, everyone is an automaton saying the same thing. Wow. We have the same message, we cannot prescribe this. So you're done. And so you're a doctor, you want to buck the system, or you're a pharmacist. Unfortunately, the FDA is sending out letters like this to the state medical boards. This was to the chief executive officer of the Federation of State Medical Boards from the FDA. It says the purpose of this letter is to bring to the attention of the Federation of State Medical Boards information related to drug products containing ivermectin being offered for sale with claims that such products treat or prevent COVID-19. Recently, FDA has received complaints about compounding pharmacies selling drug products containing ivermectin, claiming that they could treat or prevent COVID-19. So it goes on to say, although clinical trials assessing ivermectin tablets for the prevention of treatment of COVID-19 in people are ongoing, current available data do not show that ivermectin is safe or effective for the prevention or treatment of COVID-19. That's not true. Current available data did show it at the time. So they're lying to the state medical boards. And now if you're a pharmacist, you have that hanging over your head, because best believe if you're a pharmacist, you received an email that communicated that letter to you saying, we just got a letter from the FDA. All compounding pharmacies or doctors, you don't touch these things. And that's where the medical board starts getting it on the high horse and saying, anybody prescribing this is going to get their license looked at and reviewed and their documents. So I think really
it makes me just think in this moment for all of those that did go to these compounding pharmacies that put it all on the line to provide ivermectin, and we were getting for our families and others, probably time to deliver some families to those groups for standing and taking on that risk under that heat, and just say thank you for being a doctor, thank you for being an American, thank you for being open-minded and being there for us. These were critical moments, and those of us that survived, many of us, and especially those that were, failing in health that really needed these things, lives were saved by those compounding pharmacists and those doctors that were brave enough to be there for their patients.
And I want to show one image, just to put a cap on this segment here. This was shared by Pierre Corey. I believe it was from Chief Nerd on Twitter. He's doing a lot of great work on this topic. And you can see here, this is the vaccine rollout, distributed vaccines from the beginning, from the first shots all the way to present day. You can see this huge wave of the vaccine. Millions of people took it in the United States. And then right at the end there, when no one's taking anymore, that's when the FDA attorney, the Department of Justice attorney, says the FDA allows doctors to prescribe this.
So the deceptive media, controlled by pharma advertising dollars, also played along. This is what they did to Joe Rogan.
And turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
CNN actually altered that video of Joe Rogan with filters to make him appear sicker. It's just it. And then we had the Rolling Stone posted that gunshot victims were left waiting as horse dewormer overdoses overwhelm Oklahoma hospitals. Fear-mongering, fear-mongering. Well, the hospitals refuted that claim. Let's look at that. So, if you look at the photo on the left, that's what Rolling Stone put out. Gunshot victims left waiting. It's odd because the post, the Rolling Stone post, was September 3rd of 2021. Look at that photograph. Everyone is wearing winter coats. September in Oklahoma, September 3rd in Oklahoma is not winter coat season, folks. Because if you look at the photograph over on the right, it was a photograph from January via the Associated Press, and that was put out by U.S. News and World Report, and it was for a vaccine drive by a church. There has just been so much deception. Mind-boggling, mind-boggling. The amount of deception fed to us by the media, controlled by pharmaceuticals. And, you know, RFK Jr. is really hot after stopping the pharmacy companies from direct advertising to consumers. There's only two places in the world that happens, here and New Zealand. Because when pharmaceutical companies can advertise to us, it doesn't mean that we're going to go out and buy the products, because we can't. Most of them require a prescription. The point of the advertising is that when a pharmaceutical company owns 80% of the advertising dollars on any given mainstream media network, then they drive the narrative that that network is going to report. That's the problem with the pharmaceuticals advertising to consumers. So Del Bigtree and Dr. Corey kind of go over all of the corruption in the trials.
They went further than that. Right? So it's not only the lack of courage and integrity for people to step out, because you need that unique combination for those scientists to really try to direct good behavior of these regulatory agencies. But actually the opposite happened, Del. They did those studies, but they were fraudulent. They were the only studies done on ivermectin where every single investigator had massive conflicts of interest with the pharmaceutical, many times with competitors. And then when you look at the trials that they conducted and produced, which were heralded by all of academia as the largest, most rigorous trials, and all of us researchers from around the world, and I was not alone, there's a huge network of scientists, I would say in every country, who have been calling the fraud around ivermectin. And we tried to voice our objections to the design and conduct of these trials. They manipulated data brazenly. You can see it in the publications. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So it wasn't even that for a while, they were slow walking. They didn't want to do the trials. So you're absolutely right. But then, my gosh, they did them. And they did them with what they've always done in medicine, which is they design studies to fail. And
how do you do that? I mean, is there a pattern to it? Is there a lot of different ways it can go down?
I would say, actually, like everything else, there's a playbook. And it's really the same things they do. And it's very simple. I mean, I don't want to get too sciencey, but you choose the mildest patients you can, right? Because you don't want to take the most severely ill and the sickest where it's going to have the greatest impact. So you're going to mute any benefits that you find. You find them mild, you find them young, you treat them late as possible. And when you look at trials, for instance, for Paxlovid and Molnupiravir, it's unbelievable the trials they had massive numbers that they treated within 2 days.
And these are drugs they're trying to sell, right? Yes. These are drugs that are going to make them money.
And so all you have to look is the design of like an ivermectin trial and a Paxlovid trial, and you can see every single tactic that they do. So Paxlovid, they treat them early. They treat the sickest, right? Yeah. They treat them longer. They treat them at higher doses. Ivermectin, lowest dose possible, shortest duration possible, start the latest possible, in the most mildest patients possible. You
won't see anything.
But actually the thing is, you'll still see benefits. The problem is when you do all of those things, the size of the trial to show a statistically significant result is much larger than what they have. They know all those calculations. Yeah. Their whole goal is to find a lack of statistical significance. I will tell you, all the fraudulent trials actually found benefits. But in modern medicine, if you don't have what's called that p-value threshold, if you don't exceed that, it doesn't work. And to watch that, Del, to watch science being conducted at that level repeatedly, seeing the same brazen tactics every time from all over the world with these pharma-conflicted researchers, and I'm trying to call foul. I'm screaming from my office into podcasts and interviews and everything I can, and no one's listening. Well, I shouldn't say that. There is an audience, like your audience. We have an audience, but it doesn't get out there and to have major, policy impact. And I don't know what else to do but just keep pushing forward.
I think we just keep pushing it. And we are making headway. I was on this 2016 where I released my documentary Vax. The heart of Vax is a fraudulent study. Where in the middle of a study, after setting your protocols and how you're going to run the whole study, they kick half the kids off the study. I mean, that to me is fraud. Like you are changing the parameters of the study in the middle of it because you don't like what you're seeing. All for what reason? To water down the findings so that at the end they say, well, there was a little bit of a rise, but it wasn't statistically significant.
And let me say a comment about that, because there's another piece to this. So it's not only the conduct and design of the trials by pharma-conflicted investigators. The journals play a huge role, because I will tell you, if I tried to publish a study that I had done myself and I had pulled those tricks, the peer reviewers would have said, this is an invalid study, go away. They would have rejected my trial. These trials where they pull all these shenanigans and they bury people, they take data out, they manipulate the data, they change endpoints in the middle, which is a never event in the conduct of trials. They're doing these things that
you would
never
literally be laughed out of any paper if you ever did that.
And guess what happens with these trials? They're published in the highest impact medical journals in the world, where any peer reviewer worth their salt would have said, I vote to reject. This study is invalid because they did X and Y. Instead, sail right through publication, then after publication, massive headlines across the world, Ivermectin doesn't work.
So it's not just the media. It's the experts. It's academic research. It's the academic journals that we rely on. And the thing is, they knew all along that ivermectin would work. Back in 2003, 2004, during the first SARS outbreak, they began researching, and they told the CDC what they'd found. Let's take a look.
Important thing to realize is that North American science spent 15 years figuring out what to do with the next COVID. It was back 2002, 2003, the original SARS-CoV-1 occurred. And so all sorts of experiments went on to determine what would be a useful response were something similar to occur. And the research was done. Research was all done by 2015, 2016. And DARPA, D-A-R-P-A, the American research arm of the U.S. military, it specifically knew and specifically recommended and passed the information on to the CDC that ivermectin, in particular, was the absolute #1 product to be used in the event of a coronavirus pandemic. It was fully known that ivermectin, and certainly hydroxychloroquine as well, were highly antiviral and immune modulatory. And those two things were the key, to modulate the immune response, plus to be antiviral as well. Those elements were both totally proven in vitro and in vivo with animals, so that it was known, and of course we knew it was completely safe for humans because these medications had been used for 35 to 40 years in humans, and so that's what was sitting there ready to be used at the next pandemic.
Yeah, but if they used it, then the pharmaceutical companies would not have gotten their emergency use authorization, and they wouldn't have made billions of dollars. This is it really is overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, the totality of it. I know for me, sitting back, it's like, holy crap. Is everybody on the take? Is everybody corrupted? Are there any honest people left? So on December 8th of 2020, Dr. Pierre Kory testified in front of Senator Ron Johnson's Homeland Security Committee meeting on focus on early treatment of COVID-19. Just going to summarize his testimony. Since 2012, multiple in vitro studies have demonstrated that ivermectin inhibits the replication of many viruses, including influenza, Zika, dengue, and others. Ivermectin inhibits COVID replication, leading to the absence of nearly all viral material by 48 hours in infected cell cultures. Ivermectin has potent anti-inflammatory properties, with in vitro data demonstrating profound inhibition of the most potent mediators of inflammation. And if you talk to ICU doctors who cared for COVID patients during the height of the pandemic, it was the inflammatory cytokine storm that really they were battling against. And ivermectin was showing potent inhibition of the most potent mediators of that inflammation. Moving on, ivermectin significantly diminishes viral load. We now understand viral load, and protects against organ damage in multiple animal models when infected with COVID or similar viruses. Ivermectin prevents transmission. Did the vaccine prevent transmission? No, it did not. Ivermectin prevents transmission and development of COVID disease in those exposed to infected patients. Ivermectin hastens recovery and avoidance of ICU admissions and death in hospitalized patients. Ivermectin reduces mortality in critically ill patients with COVID. Ivermectin leads to striking reductions in case fatality rates in regions with widespread use. And the safety of ivermectin is nearly unparalleled, given its near zero drug interactions, along with mild and rare side effects in almost 40 years of use and billions of doses administered. Shortly thereafter, on January 14th of 2021, the NIH softened its stance on ivermectin, issuing an opinion. It stated, "There are insufficient data to recommend either for or against the use of ivermectin for the treatment of COVID-19. Yet the CDC kept posting things like this. It's from the Twitter account of the CDC, cdc.gov. The and this is from February the 1st of 2022. So a solid year later, after the NIH softens its stance on ivermectin, the CDC a year later puts out, the anti-parasite drug ivermectin is not authorized or approved by the FDA for treating or preventing COVID-19. Large doses can cause symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and seizures. Protect yourself from COVID-19 by staying up to date on your vaccines." I don't know about you guys, but this completely pisses me off. Completely. So I'm going to share with you my story of ivermectin. So in December of 2020, I was still working at my previous employer where I was being absolutely bullied on a daily basis to get the vaccine. And I continued to say no. I was not going to get it. And it was in December that they said, and the other thing was that because I was refusing to get the vaccine, I had to COVID test every week and demonstrate a negative test to my employer to prove that I was healthy. Meanwhile, all the vaccinated nurses didn't have to show a negative COVID test, yet they kept going out with COVID numerous times. They didn't get COVID once or twice. They were getting it over and over and over, yet they were okay to take care of patients because they didn't have to show a negative test. Yet because I did not get the vaccine that kept causing them to get COVID over and over, I had to prove that I was healthy with a negative test. So in December of 2020, they finally, laid down the hammer. They refused to accept my religious exemption. They laid down the hammer and gave me a deadline. And so I gave them my notice that I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. I will do whatever I have to do, but I'm not taking that vaccine. And then it was within, I think, a couple of days, ironically, is it odd or is it God? Ironically, I came home and I was like, oh, I feel horrible. And I knew that I had COVID. I did the test that I was supposed to, do, and it came back positive, of course. And I immediately started treating. So in the course of between 2020 and 2021, I had learned from Dr. Zelenko about hydroxychloroquine, and I got a stash. And I ordered all of my medicines from India, all of them, direct from India. In India, these medications are over the counter. I ordered from India. So I already had a stash of hydroxychloroquine. When I started following the FLCCC and their protocols, I learned about ivermectin. And I got a stash of ivermectin. So as soon as I started to feel that prodromal, like, oh crap, I'm coming down with something. I started ivermectin. And if you go to the imahealth.org that we visited earlier in the episode, you can go to the protocols and you can see the dosing. It is dosed 0.4 milligrams per kilogram for active treatment. It's 0.2 milligrams per kilogram for prevention. So how do you figure out milligrams per kilogram? Well, how much do you weigh in pounds? Divide that by 2.2. That's your kilograms. And then that number times 0.4 gives you your ivermectin dose. My dose is 18 milligrams of ivermectin. I started it. Within 24 hours of that prodromal beginning, where I just felt like I felt like crap, this virus is now in me and it's replicating. And I started ivermectin, I think, that evening. But by the next morning, that viral replication and my viral load had gone up and I felt like crap. I was running a fever and it was the strangest flu-like thing I'd ever experienced. It was different than regular flu, but it was just, I felt like crap. But really, it was just general malaise, no energy, and a fever. Because I was already taking vitamin D and already taking zinc and already taking high-dose vitamin C. So when I got into the second 48-hour mark of taking ivermectin, I came up out of it. Just like all of the data showed that by hour 48 on ivermectin, the virus clears. By day 3, I had absolutely no symptoms. I felt fine. I've taken ivermectin myself, and I had no negative side effects. And in 48 hours, I felt better. By hour 72, it was gone. So, anyway. So according to a Midwestern doctor on Substack in his article, Why Aren't Hospitals Incentivized to Save Lives? He states, in medicine, there is a clear contrast between algorithmic care, where doctors follow strict protocols, and the art of medicine, which involves critical thinking, individualized treatment plans, and nurturing the doctor-patient relationship, which is key to healing. Unfortunately, medical training has shifted from fostering independent judgment to prioritizing corporate-driven guidelines, leaving little room for the art of care. Because of COVID, the unconditional trust the medical industry made enormous investments to create and has relied on for decades has been shattered. A large JAMA, that's the Journal of the American Medical Association, a large JAMA study of 443,445 Americans found that in April of 2020, so that's, we're a month into COVID, 71.5% of Americans trusted doctors and hospitals. In January of 2024, that number had fallen dramatically to only 40.1%. I'm a nurse. I've invested my entire adult life's career in the medical industry that I thought was a noble profession, that was a trustworthy profession. And I no longer trust that hospitals or any corporate-run facility is operating to ensure my well-being or yours. And that puts me and many other medical professionals just like me in the position of having to choose between integrity and our life's work. And it is a very, very difficult position to be in. The medical system is broken. And the chronically diseased state of our nation reflects just how bad it is. So we're going to continue to expose, and we are going to arm ourselves with knowledge. So in the next episode, Ivermectin Unveiled Part 2, we're going to explore ivermectin's role in cancer. So I would like to just end with this. Dear God, thank you for reminding me that I am not lucky. I am blessed by you. Everything I have and everything I am is because of your goodness and provision in my life. Help me to never forget that all blessings flow from you. In Jesus' name, amen. So I would like to remind you one last time to please visit tulipblooms.shop, promo code DOSES, to save 10% on your entire order. When you support my sponsors, you support me. I hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday for Doses of Deception. God bless you.